because I have said that.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's Daybreak on Trust Television, and as usual, we are going to be looking at the stories that made the front pages of select national newspapers this morning. And in keeping with our tradition, we'll begin with the Daily Trust. The Daily Trust, as you know, is marking 25 years of robust journalism in Nigeria. And the main headline here reads, Nationwide protest, Tinubu meets Labour as workers storm National Assembly, government houses. Port Harcourt refinery will resume operation in December. That's the president giving assurance. We will address demands in 7 days, Senate tells Labour. And court summons LNC over contempt. You find that on page 4. And we have a photo montage there on the front page from our in-house photographers of what the sight and sound felt like yesterday from across the country, from Yola to Abuja.
It was a good outing.
It was, if that meant anything, so to speak.
I mean,
and moving on to other stories, ex-Governor Bagudu, Lalong Matawale, and others make Tinubu final ministerial list. Somebody whispered to me yesterday that the governors are taking over. And
or have taken over.
Or have taken over,
Yeah.
Absolutely. We will see how many more would make the ambassadorial list as we move on. Okra disease wreaks havoc on farmers' income. At caucus meeting, Tinubu charges APC leaders on financial discipline. And man died protecting son from collapsed building in Akure. What a supreme price to pay. Devaluation, Nigerian firms record 716.8 billion losses. These are losses largely associated with forex devaluation, especially owing to the foreign debts that they have in their books. Jais Bank half-year profit rises by 51%. And coup, Nigeria cuts off electricity supply to Niger.
Very strategic move.
Well, these are the major stories on the front page of the Daily Trust.
Okay, the Nigeria News Direct is up next, so let's take a look at the front page of the newspaper for today. Customs FOUA intercepts 18,925 liters of PMS and 20 pistol pouches in Ogun. So the Nigeria Customs is still doubling down on its fantastic run over the past couple of years. And it's good to note that that in itself would further stabilize importation as well as exportation, because if these smuggled or illicit products are being impounded on a regular basis, it will discourage the people who are in that business to look for legal means of doing so. The big story talks about the nationwide protest, and it says NLC TUC resolved to suspend protests according to the presidency. Okay, I think it's best you refer to the NLC's position on that one through that communique. They do have a NEC meeting today, by the way. The NLC president says, we'll make our position known today. And as Labour marches nationwide, grounds activities. Port Harcourt refinery will resume within 4 months, according to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. 4 months. No single kobo was saved from subsidy removal since May, according to Labour. Okay. Well, that's
the president is saying $1 trillion. So, well, if they are private to the government account, I don't know.
I think the president talked about $1 trillion being saved.
And clearly we saw that from the transfer to the excess crude account. So except if you're saying it's...
you talk about living in parallel reality. This is just very disturbing. Right. As governors appeal to residents, promise more palliative measures. And you have the president, the vice president flanked by a delegation from the United Kingdom. There's also the chief of staff there and the foreign secretary, Mr. Cleverly, while visiting the president at the villa. And they did discuss bilateral relations.
Am I the only one who seemed to notice that the chief of staff seemed to be jumping on the president photo ops more regularly than we have seen in recent times.
I think he's making it a tradition now. I think he's the only chief of staff that I've seen in a photo. I've seen.
I used to think they are not supposed to be
I've seen the late Abakari once or twice in a photo with President Buhari. Professor Gambari, not so much. But then again, there are people who have this, keen interest of being seen, and I suppose being former speaker, he doesn't want to be out of the spotlight that much, at least for now. Fuel subsidy, Ogun government to provide electric-powered motorbikes for residents. That's a bit ambitious, but in a good direction. Man remanded for killing 6-year-old brother. Governor Oyetola, 4 other ex-governors make Tinubu supplementary ministerial list. And finally, the NCC says Mafab has not defaulted in its 5G rollout policy.
All right, that will be an interesting story to keep pace on. And I'd like to say that I think the electric power motorbike thing has been there. Most of, in my time, in my stint in Lagos, I remember in the days of OP and the rest of it, what they provided were electric power bikes, not the conventional fuel. And that was how they were able to operate above. I mean, their balance sheet was held from not buying petrols always. Move on to the Punch newspaper. Still staying with the subsidy protest, bank offices shut amidst rally. Labour demands 200,000 naira wage. NLC TUC leaders hold emergency neck today after special meeting with Tinubu National Assembly. FG sues Labour leaders, says protests will be suspended. How protesters broke National Assembly gate. Nigeria cuts power supply. ECOWAS vow to confront junta. And FG delisted 18 illegal loan app. Ondo Oil producing area indigents protest unpaid bursary. Wow. And PDP inaugurates campaign council for Bayelsa, Imo and Kogi polls. Lagos probes doctor's death in hospital elevator as colleagues shun work. And community protest demolition, 6 Sean lose intervention. And right there above the name marks, we have Oyetola, Lalong, Bagudu, 16 others make second ministerial list.
Okay. Final stop this morning is a look at the front page of the Business Day newspaper. Textile mills under strain as gas to power cost doubles. You talk about the constraint on the economy, the manufacturing sector. This further just sheds a grim light. Niger's nightmare threatens democracy in West Africa. ECOWAS vows to reinstate ousted president. And Niger claims electricity from Niger cut after coup. And Labour meets Tinubu, says fresh commitments extracted from the federal government. I suppose the talk about the refineries is the one takeaway from that engagement, to hold further consultations on protests, which is said to be today. So before the day runs out, hopefully we'll hear a lot more from the organized labor about the next line of action. All right.
And now joining us in the studio as usual every Thursday, it's, I like to say, our extended colleague. He's taking a sabbatical. The editor-in-chief Dateline newspaper, Marlon Nasrallah. It's a pleasure to have you join us in the studio.
Thank you. Good morning. It's good to be here.
All right. I'm not sure you were at the protest ground yesterday.
No, I was not.
Maybe he wasn't invited.
No, you have to be invited. I thought there was
you were not.
Open, well, I was doing my protest right here in the studio.
Oh, okay.
No, I was not there, but I share in all the
the sentiments.
The sentiments. Yeah. All right. I'm taking off from there, and what seemed to have been the dominant story in most of the newspapers this morning, and I'm sure you probably had a glimpse of our conversation with Comrade Issa Aremu, who in his time alongside with the Shomele used to be some of the toughest minds, or toughest and brightest minds we have had in the labor movement. You followed the protest yesterday, the engagement with the National Assembly, and that with the president, and they are telling us they came out with extra commitment. Does it feel like it was what the hassles yesterday? What's that tangible commitment for you that came out of that whole engagement yesterday?
Well, as far as I can see, I have not seen much difference from, the kind of promises that the government used to make in the past. But it's good that they were able to meet with the president, and to extract those commitments, like they said. The president talking about Port Harcourt refinery, coming back on stream by the end of the year, looking into the minimum wage and other issues. I think it's good that they were able to get firm commitment based on what they said from their meeting with the president. And also, you realize that the National Assembly also said the same thing, that they should give them a week or so to be able to address some of these issues that they are, some of these demands that they have. And I think this is actually the way to go, because they were part of the negotiation in the beginning, but they had to opt out because they said they couldn't see any sincerity, on the part of the government. But now that they are, resuming negotiation, I think it's very good, because anytime something like this happens, the common man, though they claim to be doing it on his behalf, he is also the one at the receiving end most of the time.
He said something that was quite instructive. Yesterday, the president came, as you have noted, and we can see clearly that his intervention has helped douse tension. Why did he have to wait until the protests happened? Because prior to this time, as Issa Remu had noted, we were seeing non-state actors leading conversations, sensitive conversations as they were. We didn't even understand where some of those people were in the scheme of things. Some of them just have state house pass. But as far as we are concerned, we don't know what role they are playing. We've seen images of conversations where we had people at the risk of being countered, where we have had people like Representative James Falike. We don't know what role he plays in the but there in the negotiation, we see somebody like Senator Shomole. We don't know what role exactly he's playing, but he's engaged in this kind of conversation. How important is it that we domicile this conversation? Because that is what the Labour people were asking. You need to dignify this conversation by making it happen at the highest level of government.
Yeah, and sometimes they engage people like Oshomole, because he used to be part of the Labour movement. And sometimes when you are part of something for this long, you find it difficult to actually live. And it's possible he must have built bridges, and the government wanted to leverage on that. But it's always good, because this is something that has to do with Nigeria, not just the common man, because anytime we talk about fuel, the common man is affected, even the rich, the elites, they're also affected, even though some will make the argument that, they have more money in their possession to be able to withstand, all these shocks and what have you. But like you said, I think, going forward, this is what we should be seeing more often, so that anytime there is negotiation, you don't wait until the last minute for you to start coming out with, all the issues that you could have done right from the beginning. So I hope, we have learned one or two lessons going forward.
Yeah, for some people, right, this is more of the same, especially as far as the dialogue is concerned between the federal government and the organized labor, where before now the conversations was, okay, we're going to sort out the palliative moves. The presidency came out with a template, the 8,000 was bandied around, and then there was a review, and then organized labor continued. They have this palliative committee that's supposed to look at how all of these things would be rolled out. And then last week, Friday, the NLC decided to back out to Sunday's point because they don't feel like the government is taking it serious, because they're having to deal with, not that permanent secretaries are low-ranking individuals, but there are a lot more people that could make assertive commitments at a much higher level. The president's willingness to meet with organized labor yesterday after the protest says a lot about him trying to save the situation. Could this have been done sooner to perhaps give labor the sense that, listen, if this man was bold enough to remove subsidy on day one, he's bold enough to negotiate with the organized labor face to face. Going forward, do you want to see the president take a lot more active role in these engagements so that it could really add value to you? Because I suppose Nigerians take some confidence also if the president is directly involved.
Yeah, but honestly, I wouldn't want to encourage that, to say that anytime we have issues like this, we have to drag the president into it. Like,
is this beneath him? Is that what you're saying?
It's not, but right now we are yet to have ministers in place. Probably if we have someone in charge of labor and all these industrial things that have to do with workers and what have you, probably they will have saved the president that headache, because the president had a number of engagements yesterday. And if we are to limit him to just issues like this, then there will be so much. Don't forget, even the resident doctors that are on strike, before you know it, they will now start looking for such opportunities. They will be insisting that, okay, we don't want to hear from any government official. We want to hear from the president. So like I said, it's good that the president is doing that, but I wouldn't want
You don't want him to make a habit of it?
No. I wouldn't want him to be doing that all the time, because going forward, we may end up with something that will be very difficult to handle.
There is something that he has done that is signaling to a lot of Nigerians the parallel nature of how things have been done in this country, right? Champagne for the few, and then the others are being sacrificed. And in this case, is yesterday, his chief of staff went to the National Assembly, went to the Senate precisely, with the second batch, the list of the second batch of ministerial nominees, and we saw 19 names. First of all, your thought, the total is about 47 now. That in itself does not suggest that we're dealing with austerity measures, that we're cutting our coat according to our cloth. It does suggest that government somehow can still find resources to live large, so to say, because this is a fairly large executive council. What are your thoughts about that, and how many Nigerians are reading into it and say, listen, this man talked a big game about sacrifice the other day during the national broadcast, and it doesn't appear that that's what's happening with this administration.
Well, certainly the number is huge, like you said, and I already saw some, news platforms, saying that this is a record since 1999, because even President Buhari stopped at 42 or so. The same thing with former President
Jonathan
Obasanjo. Jonathan never appointed up to 40, I think. If you are talking about the need to cut the cost of governance, honestly, we will have loved to see maybe 36, so that we meet the constitutional requirements, where we have a minister from all the states. But they can also make the argument that they want it to be an inclusive, arrangement. They want people to have a sense of belonging. But then, if you look at it also, the Southeast, as a zone, has only 5 ministers. The South has 7 or so. The Northwest had 10. And then if you also look at the gender parity we're talking about, we have 47 ministerial nominees, but only 9 are women, and this is less than 20%, if I get it correct. So if you are talking, there are so many things that people will have loved to see differently, because the president made it, as part of his campaign promises, that he will make sure.
Come on, answer. If it makes political sense for him to do that, but does it make economic sense in light of everything that we're talking about right now?
Well, some of the arguments they are making is the fact that now that they have done away with the fuel subsidy problem, they will be able to have more money. So more money in
to run the government, or to take care of Nigerians,
or to take care of even the ministers and his appointees. But honestly, like I said, anytime something like this comes up, we want to tell the common man to make sacrifice. Like I keep saying, the government and its officials will also make the same sacrifice. If you are talking about 47 ministers, with all their retinue of aides and what have you, honestly,
it's a strain on our finances.
On the cost.
To make it worse, in this list is what appears to be of equal numbers to the women is the size of former governors in this cabinet. People who are already used to living large. I mean, you saw pictures of how one of them arrived for the screening with hailers and praise singers already on the ground, dancing and waiting to usher him in like a king that had returned from exile or something. Why is it beginning to feel like the federal cabinet, it's a dumping ground for ex-governors? They are either going to the Senate or aspiring to be in the cabinet, not because from the average Nigerian's perspective, they are bringing anything intrinsic to governance. At any rate, we had 4 years or 8 years, as the case may be, to evaluate what they could really do. And as I speak, you can't count off your fingers what significant progress they had brought to their places. And we're beginning to find the same people, whether for political expediency or whatever consideration, constituting a bulk of this cabinet. Is that the way to go, really? Or is this just an opportunity to pay political patronage?
Honestly, to start with, it's not the way to go. I remember the former governor of Sokoto State, Attahiru Bafarawa. He granted an interview, I think, with the BBC House of Service, and he was asked, why are you not going to the Senate? He said, no, don't forget that I used to be the governor of the whole of Sokoto State. Why should I now consign myself
a portion of it
to just a portion of it? But his colleagues are not seeing it in the same light. They just want to be part of the show, and they have already made the Senate their retirement home. There are so many former governors there. Right now, they are the ones in charge. The president is a former governor. The SGF is a former governor. The Senate president. So before you know it, all the available positions, former governors will now be there too.
And their kids are coming in as commissioners and as of members.
And it's not as if, when they were governors, they did anything remarkably different from what, ordinary, minds can do. So honestly, I think it's for Nigerians to find a way of addressing this holistically, whether in the form of a constitutional review or something, because we can't keep, going in the cycle. Because if you are a minister, you are a governor today, and tomorrow you are a minister, before you know, you are back in the Senate.
Away from quantity, let's talk about quality also, because I think there's something to be said about it. And Sunday alluded to it. Obviously, there are these unremarkable, underachieving governors who are making it to the Federal Executive Council, and you can only imagine their sphere of influence growing as a result of their participating in the administration. But in talking about some of those unknown figures who, for one reason or the other, have made it to the list, especially the young category of people, the demographic is looking good, especially for women. You have a few 30-something-year-olds. Dr. Betta, I think, is in there. Mariam Shetty is there. There's Uzoka also. Right. Give me your take on what they are bringing to the table away from just the quota that is given to women, because we also have to consider the track record, the antecedents, and whether or not they're capable of being given this huge task. Because it is one thing to govern when the times are easy, it's another thing to govern when the times are hard. And do you see the president taking a big risk? Because when you have 9 governors, former governors, in your cabinet, you reckon that most of them are going to be substantive ministers. You don't fancy any of them being Minister of State. So what about those young, upcoming figures that the president has chosen to be in his cabinet? What do you think Nigerians can expect from them, given what they may likely face as far as their role is concerned?
Maybe one thing you didn't include with the women, they are all fair.
And a number of them medical doctors.
Right. All of them. Right, right. But to be honest, this is an opportunity for them, to represent the female gender very well, so that going forward we can all make the argument that, okay, if you look at the role that they played, honestly, we need more women to be given more opportunities to but just to fill up the cabinet with former governors. Some of them couldn't even win their re-election, and they have been rejected by their people, but somehow they have found their way to the cabinet, so that they continue to maintain some level of influence. But since the president is trying to bring, fresh blood into the cabinet, he should also make it like a point of note, that they are given responsibilities, because we've not tested them. So we can't say if you give them such a big task, they wouldn't be able to accomplish. So let him not look at the faces of all these former governors. They can make do with tourism and all this
where they can create little confusion or damage.
We're looking at tourism as a revenue spinner.
Just something that is like, I wouldn't want to see, just anybody, handling
the finance or
energy,
economy,
finance, things that will require those that actually know.
Actually, we have 28 ministries, and I can't name all of them at the top of my head, but we understand also that they might create new ministries.
New ones. From what I think it's necessary, because if you remember when former President Buhari decided to give Fashola three
huge ministries,
huge portfolios, housing, power, and works. Then works. There are ministries that can actually stand on their own, but we are talking about the need to cut the cost
we
of
probably
governance.
may also be seeing the planning ministry now stand alone, as it used to be, away from finance.
And then you can even see from during the screening exercise, some of them making the argument that we don't need to have the Minister of Justice, doubling as Attorney General.
There are a lot of people who also say, like, we like to think that our presidential system is largely fashioned in a similar way to what the United States have. But if President Biden today is nominating you as secretary, you come with a portfolio. However, what we're seeing is the senators guessing. Or if you are given ministry of this, if you are given, what would you be going here? Do you think it's high time constitutionally we have, if you're nominating somebody, nominating with a portfolio, so that we understand if he's a square peg in a square hole, or something like that, and it makes the screening a lot more
easier. The questions to ask and what have you. But I saw the chief of staff to the president, trying to say that they didn't do that because the president can have a change of mind at the last minute.
Okay. Well, the president's change of mind.
I don't think that's
even if I think, argument. Like you said, even if they come with the portfolio, it doesn't stop the president from changing. Especially if he needs you to play a role that he thinks your exposure.
Best suited for.
Take a Professor Patti. He's not been taking the knife and scissors into the theater lately. He's been at administrative level, pursuing vaccines, discussing with multinationals. So it is safe to say that you could have him play other roles in the cabinet other than just that. But on the flip side of this conversation, it's also people we had thought would make this list that didn't make it, whether or not they're suitable, but maybe for the perceived role they played ahead of the election. Conspicuously, we have Fani Kayode is missing, the man from Delta, the barrister Keamo. Keamo is also missing. The other spokesperson we had hoped was going to make the ministerial list after Alake was announced special advisor, but there has been a change. Ajirin Galali is in, and he's still missing. I'm trying to Bayo Ononuga. What exactly do you think is going on?
Well, there is limit. I don't think the president can accommodate everybody, but
realistically,
there are other places, where the president can engage people, not necessarily in the cabinet. There are grade A
contracts and there are those things
and what have you. And there are so many, that wouldn't even want to be part of the government. They would rather have that access, so that if there are contracts, if there are things that they can actually make some money out of it, maybe that's what they're more interested in.
Does this team, Mr. Nasser, inspire you that President Tinubu has the necessary pieces to solve Nigeria's economic security puzzle? Do you think this team can give him the ideas as well as the execution power to implement his renewed hope vision?
Well, from my own thinking, it's like we're going back to the Obasanjo days, you know, maybe having some...
I'm sure President Tinubu will not appreciate that comparison.
Well,
go ahead.
well, to have some like ministers, you know, when Obasanjo created the economic team, they were in charge of most of government's day-to-day businesses, you know, despite the fact that you had Minister of, for Agriculture, for Health. They were the ones deciding. So I foresee the same thing happening, because if you allow all these politicians, you know, to be having a field, they honestly will do politics from now until 2027, because that's what they know. Anything governance, because how many of the governors even used to stay in their states? You know, they are always in Abuja, always traveling out, because they just want to be part of the action, like I said earlier. So I don't think the president should allow, just because you are a minister, to have like the chance, the opportunity to do as you like. I expect him to have a smaller, you know, cycle of you know, strong
kitchen cabinet, if you like.
Kitchen cabinet, if you like.
All right,
so that,
I think
some of the things can,
I think he has hinted at that when he said in several forums that they're going to come up with KPIs. I hope they do. Yeah. And that in that strategic documents that was prepared for him, we saw some kind of steering committee arrangement, which is now headed by Adizabala, which is a cabinet sitting position that is supposed to pick out what the administration would determine as critical projects to it, regardless of where they fall, and she will be coordinating and getting weekly briefing. However this works, what we are interested in at the end of the day is a semblance of competent governance that will begin to change our narrative for the better. The coup in Niger, we seem to be applying all kinds of non-kinetic strategy to coerce the juntas into giving in. We cut electricity. We've been shouting all along that we've been giving out this electricity even when we don't have enough.
Too long. Far too long.
But that's because people don't know the story behind that. If Niger Republic had maybe decided to do
a dam,
what Cameroon did, you know, would have ended up with less water. Like, see what is happening to us. Anytime Cameroon decides to release water from the Benue, you know, Channel part of it, there is flood in Nigeria. But the agreement is, since Nigeria is more buoyant financially, maybe we should be allowed to generate electricity from the River Niger, so that we now return some of it to Niger. Right now, Niger, I think they are cash strapped, and probably they don't have the money to start engaging in this kind of white elephant projects. But don't forget, there are also interests, you know, that we may not be seeing. Russia is trying to make its presence its influence rather in West Africa very strong, and you can see also the West is doing the same thing. So honestly, we should be very careful how we go about it. Yes, we should be able to push, to put pressure on Niger so that they return to democratic governance. If possible, the president that they toppled, you know, should go back to his position. But you know, some of them, the argument that they are making, look at the membership of ECOWAS. Some of them are changing the constitution left, right, and center, you know, to extend their tenure. They are doing all sorts of things, you know. Even though they are civilians, that does not mean they have the right to like run amok on the people. And this is some of the arguments that, you know, these soldiers are making. And you can see already Burkina Faso and Mali, you know, are now coming to side with the junta in Niger.
But how much of this is posturing? Because I feel like they're playing poker. Everybody's trying to call everybody's bluff. But how much of this do you think is, how much of the threat is actually a real threat? Whether it's from the military juntas showing support for what has happened in Niger, or from ECOWAS threatening military action to reinstall Mohamed Bazoum as president?
Well, I think posturing is part of diplomacy, because if you can get somebody to act without involving the use of military, the military option. I think it's better for that person, and even on the part of Nigeria, because look, nobody knows what will happen by the time you initiate a military action. It may drag on for decades, and that's not what we want to see.
All right. Thank you very much. Time is not our friend. We wish we could stretch this conversation even further. There's so much going on. Militaries are deployed in 32 out of 36 states. That's huge on our part. To begin to think that we would take on something else is something we can't contemplate, especially with the sufferings that we're enduring. But we'll continue to explore this conversation when next we bring Marlon Nasru into the studio. I want to thank you very much for finding time to be here.
Thank you
and
very
for
much
bringing
for
us
having
those
me.
refreshing perspective,
Thank you.
as always.